Why do you never finish open world games? Well, it's not your fault. Open world video games have one specific flaw that holds them back, and it actually has a lot to do with our brain's chemistry. Before we get into the video essay, I just wanted to jump in here and remind you to subscribe and like the video for more content like this every single month. It's free and really helps the channel grow. Thank you so much. So, open world games. With video games being the premier medium for escapism, it makes a lot of sense that we would want to go anywhere and do anything. I mean, it was all over the marketing for a few years. Taglines at the end of trailers, the biggest maps you've ever seen, fully destructible playgrounds, endless side quests, and close to 100 hours of gameplay. And with the typical price of a AAA game rising from $60 to $70, gamers are clearly going to want enough content to justify that price. A 7-hour cutscene fest like The Order 1886 isn't going to cut it anymore. Not that it ever did. Remember that one? Ugh. When big budget developers go open world, we're hypothetically getting more bang for our buck. Sprawling landscapes, endless side quests, progression trees, 80+ hours of gameplay to see everything the game has to offer. So mathematically, we are getting the most for our money with these outings. But quantity doesn't always beat out quality. Recent open world games just fall short for one reason or another. And if you never finish the games you buy, what's the point, really? Shiny new open worlds like those in Horizon Forbidden West, Elden Ring, and God of War Ragnarok are just around the corner, but I find it hard to get invested in these releases. All the hype for these AAA blockbusters over the past few years has led to buggy, unfinished, or just unplayable messes at worst. And they're being pumped out constantly by all the biggest studios. So many options, but when they all clone a formula, those options almost become pointless. And that's one of the major complaints a lot of people have when it comes to open world video games. The prison of choice. The more choices we're confronted with, the more exhausted our brains will get from decision fatigue. Too much freedom can make us feel like we have no freedom at all. We make 35,000 decisions every day, and each of those cause us to feel a little bit more worn out. So it's often easier for our brain to shut down and not to make a decision, going with the path of least resistance. Once the training wheels of the tutorial come off, we're going to inevitably rack up side quests left and right. Some will definitely be memorable diversions, like the drinking side quest in Skyrim that leads you to befriending a Daedric prince, or the one in Breath of the Wild where Link helps rebuild a town one resident at a time. But let's be honest, most will boil down to fetch quests, or even worse, escort missions. Escort missions are the worst, but that's a different video. The longer you play the game, the longer your list of virtual chores becomes. But they're optional, right? Well, they are to an extent. You could progress the main story, but hey, finding your son in the apocalypse can wait. He'll be fine. We're given endless choices of what to do next, so why would we want to sit through the most linear and rigid part of the game? Plus, if we were just thrown into this world, our natural instinct is to explore rather than speed through the main missions. After all, we want to get our money's worth. Let's take it nice and slow. So, when we put off the main story, we're left with side quests that boil down to the same old tower capturing to unlock a portion of the map, or errand running for a helpless villager. I can't really blame the devs though. When you need to come up with 100+ tasks to dot around the imposingly huge map, there are bound to be some familiar formulas that you stick to. But that doesn't make arriving at these wash, rinse, repeat waypoints after a long trek across the world map any less disappointing. Not just because the quests become so samey after tens of hours, but because those treks become tedious too. For a while, open world games were in a race to see who could create the largest map possible. It was in every marketing campaign and every trailer. And now, we have these endless maps, but are they fun to navigate? I'd hazard a guess and say every player's least favorite part of an open world game is the actual traversal of that world. The monotonous dirt paths. And more dirt paths. And more dirt paths with not a whole lot happening. Maybe a non-consequential encounter every once in a while, but not much beyond that. Because of the size of these maps, going from one point to another for a quest can be a considerable investment of time. And to make that journey, players have almost no choice but to follow a colored line on a minimap or an arrow pointing the way forward. Which, to be fair, is a tolerable solution, even if it's not an exciting one. I'd rather know where I'm going than be lost in the endless depths of late game Subnautica for hours at a time every time I'm looking for my next task. The real problem comes when you realize you've been spending the last 15 minutes staring at the corner of your screen, moving your little arrow along the critical colored path rather than taking in the actual game itself. Devs may have spent years crafting this area's scenery, but all you end up seeing is the highly simplified version of that in order to navigate anywhere. Of course, you could speed up the process with a bit of fast travel, but at that point, you may as well just have a list of locations to warp to instead of an interconnected world structure. Fast travel is usually the most boring way to go and doesn't give you a chance to be surprised or explore. So we're left with, mostly, walking everywhere. Maybe riding a horse. And making walking interesting is quite the task. Except when games start getting a little more creative. Web swings, motorcycles, sliding with arrows, I guess? I don't really know how to describe that, but it's fun. This is where open world games are made or broken, in their movement mechanics. If your world isn't fun to traverse, all the creative side quests in the world can't save it. The vast majority of a player's time in a larger open world game is actually spent in the traversal stage, just getting to the quest markers. I'll often find myself firing up Insomniac's New York just to swing around for an hour or two with no real goal, just for fun. I can't say the same for an Elder Scrolls game. Walking through forest after forest just isn't as exciting as, say, pulling off underwater tricks in Abzu. Games like this are about the journey rather than the destination. Objectives just become an excuse for you to play around in different parts of these worlds, and they're often crafted to facilitate just that, play. I don't need to be bribed with experience points when moving through a world is just fun. This is a big reason that I've been gravitating towards micro open worlds lately. Game worlds that allow players to move all they want, but don't spread out too far. These smaller areas can also be a lot more tailored to a specific experience while not overstaying their welcome. Plus, it solves the problem of getting lost in a huge map without being told where to go by a colored line on a minimap. It's freedom without too much freedom. But ultimately, the single biggest reason that you never finish games that require lengthy time investments? Your brain's chemical balance. Depression and anxiety are two mental health issues that have been found to actually increase the likelihood of us dropping a hobby sooner than we might want to. And as someone who often struggles with this cocktail of mental health issues, it was really interesting doing the research behind this video's thesis. A lot of studies have been conducted around this phenomenon, but the main takeaway is that our brains create and release serotonin a lot less frequently and at lower volumes than the brains of other people. Usually, when someone finds a pastime that really connects with them, they get a blast of serotonin, which keeps them coming back for more. Serotonin, after all, is a chemical in our brain that just feels good. Each time they engage with the activity, the serotonin production lessens slightly as it becomes more and more of a routine. When a person's brain creates less serotonin overall, that person's continued interest in a hobby fades much more quickly. So while someone may start fishing and enjoy it for years to come, someone else who experiences depression or anxiety will only stick with it for about 6 months, statistically speaking, despite genuinely enjoying it. So when we zoom in to the lifespan of a video game, the same thing holds true. We're less likely to see a long game through to the end because over time, the amount of serotonin that our brain produces dramatically decreases, leaving each hour we spend with a specific game feeling less and less rewarding. And this goes tenfold for open world games, because for the most part, after a few hours of world building and tutorialization, the only new content we see is story related or decorative at best. A lot of side quests repeat and become formulaic, whereas most other genres in gaming are able to hold our attention by introducing new gameplay elements, wildly new design ideas, or stick around just long enough to leave us wanting more. Like how Metroidvanias introduce new movement mechanics or new parts of the world every few hours to keep us interested. Open world games recycle gameplay loops a lot more often than other genres, making them less and less engaging as we move through them for close to 100 hours a lot of the time. But hey, we got our money's worth, right? But there's still reason to be optimistic. Not all open world games fall into the traps of a lot of AAA Ubisoft clones. Over the last few years, especially in the indie game space, developers have been getting really creative with their perspectives on what an open world can really be. And that's what I'm excited to see more of in this genre. In the lifespan of any media genre, after the classic period defined by oversaturation and a formula grown stale, comes the revisionist period. A period of imaginative innovation, of reinventing tropes, and bucking expectations. It's my favorite period in a lot of genre life cycles. So honestly, I'm excited to see where open world video games go from here. They could really go anywhere and do anything. Hey there, thank you so much for watching the video essay. I put a lot of work into these, so I really appreciate it. Do you have a favorite open world game that I totally forgot to talk about? If you do, leave a comment below and tell me what makes it great. Also, thank you so much to Marina Pacific, Voximandius, and Actual Folkboy for being monthly supporters over on my Ko-fi page. If you'd like to help make future video essays like this one possible too, there's a link below in the description. You can go over to the page and become a member for as little as $4 a month for behind-the-scenes looks at future videos, polls to help decide on future content, and you'll get your own personal thank you at the end of each of these videos. Or if you just want to make a one-time donation, you can do that there too. Each of these videos takes over 40 plus hours to produce for me, so I would really appreciate it. Thank you so much. It all goes to making future content even better. Anyway, thank you so much. Subscribe, like, all the things. I appreciate you. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.